Sleeping Beauty, retold by Charles Fromm, illustrated by Robin DeWitt. Once upon a time, a very long time ago, there lived a king and a queen. The two had everything that a king and queen could want, everything except a child. And this they wanted more than anything else. One day, while the queen was bathing in a forest stream, a frog hopped up to her and spoke. "All of your wishes will be fulfilled," croaked the frog. "You will give birth to a child within a year's time." The frog's words came to pass. A year later, the queen gave birth to a perfect little baby daughter. They named her Briar Rose. The king and queen were so overjoyed by the child's birth that they decided to have a grand feast to celebrate. The king thought it would be wise to invite the 13 local fairy women. Unfortunately, he had only 12 golden plates, so the king decided to invite 12 of the fairies. The day of the banquet finally arrived. It was the most splendid feast that the kingdom had ever seen. When everyone had their fill of food and drink, the fairy women began presenting the newborn princess with gifts. They gave her splendid gifts such as wisdom, beauty, and grace. After the 11th fairy had given her gift, the castle door flew open and the 13th fairy stormed in. "Although I was not invited to celebrate the child's birth," cried the wicked fairy, "I too have a gift. On her 15th birthday, the princess shall prick her finger on a spindle and die." With that, she turned and ran from the hall. In the silence that followed, the 12th fairy stepped forward. She was the only fairy who had yet to give the princess a gift. "On the princess's 15th birthday," said the gentle fairy, "she will prick her finger on a spindle, but she will not die. She will fall into a deep sleep lasting 100 years. The king and queen were stricken with grief. To help Briar Rose avoid her misfortune, the king collected all of the spindles from all of the spinning wheels in the kingdom and had them destroyed. 15 years passed, and the kingdom had all but forgotten about the evil fairy's curse. All of the good fairy's birthday wishes were fulfilled, and the princess was as kind and clever as she was beautiful. On Briar Rose's 15th birthday, she decided to explore every nook and cranny of the castle. After a time, Briar Rose came upon a stairwell that she had never been up before. She climbed the narrow, twisting stairwell until she reached a wooden door with a little key in the lock. Briar Rose turned the key and opened the door. Sitting in a tiny room was an old woman. She was working on a machine that Briar Rose had never seen before. "Good day, Granny," said the princess politely. "What are you doing?" "I'm spinning," said the woman. "Would you like to try?" As soon as Briar Rose reached for the spinning wheel, she pricked her finger on the spindle, and the curse was fulfilled. Briar Rose fell upon a bed that stood in the tower room and dropped into a deep, sound sleep. The good fairy's enchantment was so strong that everyone and everything in the castle fell soundly asleep as well. The king and the queen fell asleep on their thrones. The cook fell asleep in her kitchen. Even the bees in the garden fell asleep. As the years passed, a hedge of thorny briar roses grew around the castle. The legend of the slumbering castle traveled far and wide. Many brave young men tried to enter the thorny fortress, but the briars had grown so thick and wild that no man could get through. After many years, the story of the beautiful sleeping princess reached a young prince in a distant land. The prince decided that he must see if the legend was true. He traveled by day and by night until he reached the enchanted kingdom. The prince came upon an old man near the briar-covered castle. "Sir," said the prince, "I will share my supper with you if you will tell me the story of the sleeping maiden." The old man agreed. The next morning, the prince told the old man that he planned to see the beautiful briar rose with his own eyes. The old man tried to discourage the brave prince, but the prince had already made up his mind and only laughed at the old man's warnings. The prince mounted his horse and rode to the castle. It was exactly 100 years since Briar Rose had gone to sleep. When the prince approached the thorny hedge, the briars parted and let him pass unharmed. The prince needed all his courage to enter the castle. He could hear his footsteps echo as he searched for the sleeping princess, but he couldn't find her anywhere. Finally, the prince climbed up the same twisting staircase that Briar Rose had climbed earlier, and there he found the sleeping princess. Briar Rose looked so beautiful as she slept that the prince's heart was filled with love. He knelt down and placed a tiny kiss on the princess's forehead. The moment that the prince kissed her, the spell was broken, and Princess Briar Rose awoke from her slumber. She looked up at the prince and fell in love. The prince and Briar Rose walked down from the tower hand in hand. The two found the whole castle astir. The king and the queen were stretching on their royal thrones. The cook went back to her cooking, and once again the bees started buzzing. A few days later, Briar Rose and her prince were married, and everyone in the kingdom lived happily ever after.